You know, braided line can get a bad rap for ice fishing, and I think the reason being is that some of the earliest braids, you know, they're a high strand braid that absorbed a lot of water, and when that braid would get on your spool, it would freeze up. But I tell you what, a lot of these new braids are designed specifically for ice fishing, don't absorb the same amount of water. They're good on the spool, and what I find is when the conditions are brutal and it's really cold, I would much rather use braided line fishing outside than monofilament. Reason being is that if braided line sticks to your hole, the side of the hole, or it freezes up, I can pop it, I can be a lot more aggressive with it. I can take a mitten or a glove and just shred the ice off the braid, whereas monofilament, you have to baby it so much. When it's 20 below zero, braid all the way if you're fishing outside. Now, a couple of things where braid really has a strong following with ice fishing is whenever you're fishing over really deep water. And so Devil's Lake, for example, when we're fishing for perch in 40 feet of water, there's so much stretch in monofilament when you get that deep that braided line, I feel like, gives you a big advantage, not just for setting the hook, but also bite detection. When you're walleye fishing, you're using lures like spoons, rattle baits, glide baits, I feel like you get a lot more pop and a lot more flash off your lure if you're using braided line. Now, if you're fishing where there's really clear water, you might have to add a fluorocarbon leader below your braid. But I find that areas where there's stained water, in deep water, especially whether you say you're fishing 24 feet of water in Lake of the Woods or 36 feet of water on Devil's Lake, you can just go directly to braid. It doesn't seem to matter to the fish. Now, a couple of things when you're spooling up with braided line on a spinning reel, a lot of people think they have to use backing because if you don't have some type of a mono backing, your line is going to spin or slip on the reel. I'm just going to show you a little trick here that's a lot faster and a lot easier, where you don't need any backing on your reel. And so you just tie a loop knot, basically like a snare, or I'm just doing a couple overhand wraps on the line. Real simple. I'm going to cut this tag end off. Okay, I cut my tag end off. So I've got this loop. I'm just going to go on my spool and tighten that loop up. Now if I were to try to spool up or reel up with my line like that, it's just going to turn or spin on the spool. And so what I do is I just find this little line keeper here, and you just run your braid through that line keeper with a little bit of slack line, and now you can spool up a straight braid, and you don't have to worry about a backing. And so I'm just going to spool up here real quick. So in clear water, you know, you might want to use a fluorocarbon leader. A lot of times I like to go with the thickness of the ice just so that when I get that small swivel up near the top of the ice, I know how far below the ice the fish is. But if you're on a place, if you're in a body of water, like say Devil's Lake, Lake of the Woods, where you've got some stained water, you can just go direct to braid on your lure. It doesn't seem to matter to the fish, but what I like to do is I like to darken the braid. Even if I'm using a darker braid, it'll fade with the sun over time. And so I just run a Sharpie up and down that braid, that high vis braid. That way, underwater, that black just seems to disappear really well in deep water. But then I've got the high vis when I'm fishing as far as being able to watch your line in the hole. And so there's a lot of different applications where braid can really shine. Deep water, fishing aggressively outside, fishing when it's really brutal conditions. You can do so much more with braid as far as just being aggressive. And so what I find when I'm using monofilament, when the conditions are brutal outside, I have to be so much more gentle with it. With braided line, you can be a lot tougher with it. You can abuse it a lot more. You can snap it. You can run your gloves down it. You know, it's just a lot harder to break. Even the thinner braids, you know, if you're dealing with, say, a 6 or an 8 pound braid, you can abuse it so much more than some of the thinner monofilament lines.